I'm Doug Keck, and this is special EWTN Bookmark coming to you from Rome. Our guest author is Father Joseph Roesch, MIC, of the Marians of Immaculate Conception. The book Fatima, A Pilgrimage with Mary, published by our friends at Marion Press, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. And it is great to see you, Father Joe Roesch, an old friend of EWTN, a series host, and obviously for many, many times hosting our coverage coming from the Divine Mercy every year. And now great to see you in Rome as an author.
It's great to be here with you, Doug, coming to you from Rome.
Very, very good. So, Father, let me just ask you quick to catch us up a little bit. How long have you been there, and what is your role when you're not writing books on Fatima?
Well, I've been here in Rome for 13 years now. I was elected last year for my third term, so I'll be here till 2023 if the Lord allows. And I'm the Vicar General of the Marian, so I help with the administration of the Marian work all over the world. I'm the local superior of our house here in Rome, so I'm in charge of the priests and the young priest students who study at our house here in Rome. And then I do a certain amount of traveling as well, visiting our Marians in different parts of the world to see how they're doing, to encourage them in their work, and to see what new missions we can get started with.
So let me ask you, is this your first book that you've actually put together?
It is. It is my very first book.
Whose idea was it? Was there an idea in your order to decide to do a series of books like this? Is this something that you yourself felt called to do? What exactly was the genesis?
We, at our Marian Helper Center in Stockbridge, for many years we've put out magazines and articles and leaflets and things like that, but there's more of a move now to get into the book publishing. Some of our young priests, Father Don Calloway and Michael Gately, have been having some beautiful books coming out on Marian consecration and the Rosary, etc. And so, as Marians of the Immaculate Conception, we always like to have something to do with Mary. And so there was a kind of an idea that came in the Marian Helpers Center to do a series of books on images of Our Lady at shrines and around the world. And so I was approached to do this, and so I did. Well, I went to Fatima last year in January with a photographer and some of our writers, and together we conceived the concept of the book and how it would be put together. We took some pictures, we shot some videos, and it was a kind of a good experience. And then we had other photographers go last summer when there was the canonization of the young visionaries, and they took some pictures while the Pope was there as well. So there's this book on Fatima, A Pilgrimage with Mary, and forthcoming books we want to have images of Our Lady in Rome. I've already written a copy for that book. Hopefully that'll be coming out sometime this year. And then we're hoping that next year we'll have another book coming out on images of Our Lady from Lourdes and the Miraculous Medal in Paris.
Let me ask you, in relation to this particular book, we think usually in terms of the Marians of Divine Mercy and that connection there in a sense. But here you are in Fatima. Now in the book itself, you say that Our Lady of Fatima played a critical role in my vocation as a Marian. After I had graduated from college, I was working as an actor, and I badly needed a reconversion to fervent practice of my Catholic faith. So why Our Lady, why Fatima, and what was going on in your life?
Well, I grew up in a Catholic home in Staten Island, New York, one of 5 children. My parents are secular Franciscans, daily Mass goers, and so I learned to be an altar server from a young age and thought about the priesthood from a young age. I looked into the Vincentians and into the Archdiocese of New York. Then I went away to college, and I worked for a couple of years after college as an actor. And while I was in college and those couple of years afterwards as an actor, I was really drifting away from my faith. But as I had been growing up, my mother used to have a large statue of Our Lady of Fatima in our house. We used to pray the family rosary together in our house, so that was always an important part of my growing up. So it was after a couple of years on the road as an actor back in New York. I was working at the tickets booth in Times Square. I really needed that reconversion, and my mother was always trying to give me materials to convince me to get back on track, but I was resisting. But for some reason, a little tiny book on the visionaries of Fatima just touched my heart. I was just touched by the sacrifices that these little children made. And when I read that, I just couldn't get enough of it. I read it cover to cover, and then I said to her, "Do you have anything more?" And she says, "Oh, I'd be happy to give you more." So she found some more materials for me. And that started me on the road back. I started going to daily mass at some of the churches in Manhattan, getting to confession regularly, praying the rosary and the chaplet of mercy. And eventually, I was able to get to Fatima, make a pilgrimage there after I had gotten into contact with my community. And the first member of my community that I met face to face was a Marion in Fatima, and that's how I got on the road to joining the Marions.
Well, it seems in some way you owe some of this to your brother getting sick. Did I read that right?
Well, that was another interesting story. I had a younger brother who was also in need of a reconversion, and my mother had paid for a trip with the Blue Army of Fatima and Father Matthew Fox. He used to bring young kids to Fatima every summer. And so she was trying to get him on that plane. She figured if she could get him to that shrine in Fatima, maybe she could get him back on track. But he failed a course in high school, and he had to take a summer class. And he was, she went to the school, tried to convince the brother, oh, he needs to get to Fatima. And the brother says, well, if he doesn't take this course, he's going to fail. He can't go on. So now she had paid for a trip, and my brother couldn't go. So she said to me, do you want to go to Fatima? And I had already been in touch with my religious community, the Marions, but I had never met anyone face to face. I had been writing to the Vocation Director. So I said, well, I have the opportunity to go to Fatima. And the Vocation Director said, well, go see the Marions. We have a house right near the shrine in Fatima. So I did. I looked up the Marions. I found them. There was a wonderful Portuguese priest there. And he said, he turned out he was the Vocation Director for the Marions in Portugal. And he asked me how old I was, and I said 24.
Right.
He said 24 is the perfect age. 23 is too soon, 25 is too late. Join now. So he convinced me that I should take the plunge, and I was a little afraid of getting sent overseas someday and not being able to speak the language. And but at Fatima, I felt Our Lady and our Lord were just taking away my fears and letting me open my heart to God's call. So I came back to the States. I joined the community. And then I worked in the States as a seminarian and then as a priest for many years, thinking I'll always work in the States, little thinking that someday the Lord had in mind to send me overseas to live here in Europe for many years, and I had to learn a new language. But the Lord gave me time to get used to things first.
Well, it's interesting because you also indicated, I think the Vocation Director might have had different ages for different people that were exactly the right age, right?
Yeah, I think he said that to every candidate he ran into, no matter their age. But I was the right age for myself, because I had thought about the priesthood at a younger age, and I wasn't ready at the time. I thought about it in high school. I wasn't ready then. So the Lord, I had to wait until I was ready to answer the Lord's call. And at that time, I don't think those were the communities I was being called to, or the diocesan priesthood. I felt I was called to this community. So in God's time,
it was the right
everything
time.
worked out.
Well, let me ask you, the actual layout of the book, it's kind of a little bit more like a coffee table book, as you indicated, in a sense, and also the name, having it as a pilgrimage with Mary, is very much photo-oriented, and I'm assuming that was the idea of this book, and that the other books to come will follow in the same format.
That's right. That's what we want to do. We want to give people at home who don't have a chance to go to these beautiful shrines a chance to experience the beauty of these shrines. It's very evocative. They have some beautiful pictures there, and it really can take you to the shrine. So you really are making a pilgrimage with Mary. We have in the book the text, which is what I wrote about the apparitions, the 100th anniversary of the apparitions, telling the story of the apparitions. But the pictures that go along with it can really make you, bring you to the shrine. And Our Lady, our whole life is like a pilgrimage. Our Lady wants to bring us to her Son Jesus. So we really enter into that program of formation, like Mary was forming the visionaries. Now she wants to form each of us, and those who read the book and look at these pictures can be drawn into that pilgrimage with Mary.
Right. Now you say in the book here, talking about Fatima Today, you say Fatima Today stands as a rebuke to a world that still conducts itself as if there is no eternity. What did you mean?
Well, you know, the secular world that we're in today, there's so many people don't believe in God. It's sad. Recently there was these terrible shootings in the United States, and some people are saying, well, let's pray for those who are affected, or somebody was very sick recently. I saw had a heart attack, and an actor had sent out a tweet, "I'll be praying for you." And the guy's followers are saying, "What are you talking about? Prayer? What good is that? Good thoughts? That doesn't do anything." And so the whole sense of the sacred, the supernatural, God, everything seems to be lost. Everybody's so confused. And if all that is in the world is this world and nothing more, we're in pretty bad, we're in big trouble. So I think we have to remember that God exists, that God is real, and places like Fatima, these kind of shrines, can remind us of that. There's more than what meets the eye, and that we have to remember that eternity is what awaits us. And we don't want to offend God, as Our Lady says. We want to live our lives so that we can arrive at heaven to be with God forever. That's God's plan for us.
Let me ask you, you talk about about the 3 shepherd children, and you ask the question, why children? It's a fair question of all the people in the world to whom Our Lady would appear to in 1917. Let me ask you, I was in 5th grade the first time I read a book about Fatima, and that connected me to it, and it always has. How old were you when you got that book that connected you?
Well, by that time I was already in my early 20s. So I had known about Fatima from an earlier age, as I said, because we used to pray the family rosary, so I had heard about these kids before. But I was really touched at that moment when I had read that book in my early 20s.
Now, in the book itself, as you go through in the pictures, and we'll be putting some up in the interview as we go along, and you talk about prayer and sacrifice, and you say, I think the themes, 2 themes predominate in the second visit from the Angel of Portugal, mercy and sacrifice. How do you see those going together, and are we missing that today?
Well, before Our Lady appeared to the children in 1917, there was an angel who appeared to the children in 1916 3 times to prepare them. They were 3 little shepherd children taking their sheep out into the field. They were very much like most other children. They had their strengths and their weaknesses. Some of them were a little reserved, some of them were a little precocious, some of them were a little bratty even. So they were not extraordinary children by any means. But those were the 3 children that God chose. And the angel said to them, God has designs of mercy on you, meaning that God has a plan, and he wants to bring you into this plan to help to spread this message of Fatima. Now their lives after that were completely changed. It became very difficult. I would never want to be a visionary because the one, Lucia, her mother misunderstood her and thought she was lying, and the others, everybody wanted a piece of them. They had no peace after that, but their lives were completely changed because of this new relationship they had with with Our Lady. So they were willing to make sacrifices, to offer little things up. One, Francisco, he just wanted to go into church and pray and make reparation, pray for sinners, pray that no one would go to hell. He wanted to hide in a little cave. Sometimes he would hide in the attic to get away from all the townspeople and the others who were trying to find him. And he just wanted to make reparation and give his life to God. So their lives were completely changed, and they just wanted to live for sinners and help sinners. They wanted to live for God. They wanted to see Our Lady. They wanted to make prayer and sacrifice the center of their lives.
Now, it's interesting, too, because the Eucharist is central here, too, because you talk about with the angel, obviously, with the Eucharist, but what's interesting, a couple of things that you point out in that chapter, A Eucharistic Life. The angel's also asking for reparation for sacrileges and indifference against the Eucharist. You say, I can't imagine what they might have been 100 years ago, but we have a sense of what they are today. The first and most obvious is that many people don't even bother to go to Mass today. They're too busy or too indifferent. And then you go on to say, in the final visit, the angel also talks to the children about the sin of ingratitude towards God, because sometimes it does seem in the church today that we congratulate ourselves for showing up at Mass.
Yeah, I think we can take God for granted and all the graces he wants to pour out on us. We go to church thinking that I have to be entertained. I think maybe that's this media culture that we're in now. Everybody has to have that stimulus. And so if everybody has that short attention span now, and we've lost that sense of quiet and contemplation and praying, that Francisco just wanted to get away from the noise, and he wanted to find a small little cave and just pray and just be alone with God. And I think that's what's needed in our day and age now, to learn from these little children. We can't grow holy without some silence. We can't grow holy without opening our hearts to God and without prayer. And we certainly can't go holy if we don't avail ourselves of the sacraments and the graces that God wants to pour out on us. And so many people just take God for granted and they don't bother to go.
Right. Now, in the section called Willingness to Suffer, you give a quote from Our Lady: "Are you willing to offer yourselves to God and bear all the sufferings He wills to send you as an act of reparation for the sins by which He is offended and of supplication for the conversion of sinners?" And then you say, all I can say is Our Lady doesn't pull any punches. What did you mean?
Well, it's interesting, these little children, as I said, they were like any other children. There was a tradition of prayer in Fatima at that time, so they would pray their rosary every day when they went out into the field. But sometimes what they would do, they would take a shortcut. They would get to like a fast-track rosary where they'd just say, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, to get finished with their rosary quicker so that they could go into the field and play and dance and sing and do whatever the little children would do. But once they began to have these apparitions of Our Lady, and she asked them, "Are you willing to make sacrifices and to suffer?" And they said, "We are. We're ready. We're ready to do what's needed." And I think one of the things that really touched them, they had a vision of hell. Our Lady showed them hell, and they didn't want anyone to end up in hell. So they were willing to make all kinds of sacrifices. So for instance, they would spend the whole day out in the hot sun watching these sheep, and they would give up part of their lunch, or they wouldn't take a drink of water even though they were very thirsty. And little children offering up difficult sacrifices like that, it's hard to imagine, but it's because they were so motivated. They knew what Our Lady was asking them to do was so important, and they didn't want anyone to end up in hell, so they were very, very motivated. And that's, I think, what really struck me when I read that little book. These little children are willing to make so many sacrifices. And I said, what about me? I'm just trying to be comfortable. I'm just trying to have a peaceful, happy life like so many other people. And we miss the importance of making a sacrifice and denying ourselves little things so that we can offer them up to God. Because those little sacrifices can have a great effect. I'll tell you a little story. A summer or two ago, my mother had a terrible case of the shingles, and she was really suffering. And it was very hard to see how much she was suffering, but she would offer that up. She said, I'm offering this terrible pain up, Lord, so that no one would end up in hell. And so those kind of things are very important.
Wow. And this is another thing you point out here. We always focus on the messages, and you point about the fact that sometimes we obscure the real secrets of Fatima because we focus on not the messages in that sense, but the quote-unquote secrets. And there's a gentleman you quote here, I don't know if it's Dr. Gomes or Gomez, who says, Fatima has been called the most political of apparitions. I believe it is in the sense that it is a call to apply ourselves to the world. Do you agree with that?
Well, at the time of the apparitions, 1917, there was the First World War. There was the Bolshevik Revolution. The Communist Revolution was just taking over, and we saw what happened after that. You know, Russia became communist, China became communist. All these countries, communism, the errors were spread all over the world. And Our Lady was saying, pray that Russia wouldn't spread its errors. And Our Lady was praying for that consecration of Russia. And so the idea that Fatima is a political apparition in that we can get involved with the world. We can offer our prayers and sacrifices for peace. Our Lady asked that we would pray the rosary every day for peace in the world. Sometimes we can throw up our hands and thinking, oh, there's so many terrible things going on in the world, what can I do? But we're all involved. We're all in this together. And so that's why Our Lady asks us to become involved in these difficult things, to pray the rosary every day for peace. And the rosary is a powerful weapon against all the wars that are going on. Right. God can change hearts. When we offer our prayers, we offer our sacrifices, and the destiny of the world can change. Right. So it's very important that we do our part, cooperate with heaven, and help to bring about that peace that Our Lady wants. She said, in the end, my immaculate heart will triumph.
Right.
God doesn't want all the wars and all the violence in the world. He wants peace. He wants unity.
Right. Well, you talk about how Our Lady reminds us at Fatima that sin is real and it has eternal consequences, which a lot of people today either don't believe or don't really like to think too much about. But you also talk about where do we go from here, in a sense, the fruits of Fatima, as you were just alluding to, because some people would say, we don't see peace, nor does it seem that the triumph of the Immaculate Heart promised by Our Lady in the second part of the Secret of Fatima has fully taken place. You say, so what do we make of this delay? What do you make of it?
Well, yeah, some people would say, well, where's the good fruits that's coming from it? Well, there have been some good fruits that are coming from it. We have seen some changes. Look at after the fall of the Iron Curtain in Europe, the changes of some of the countries in Europe, the more freedom that's taking place now under some countries that were so encloaked in the communist ideology for so long. The faith is starting to bloom again. We're starting to see some vocations in the world. Obviously, we have a long way to go. There's still a lot of difficulties in the world. But, you know, if we do our part, God can continue to do his part. So I think all of us has to be convinced that we don't want to offend God. We want to believe that God is real, and we have to ask Jesus to forgive our sins. We have to go to confession. We have to start living a holy life, and then we can start giving good example to others. People have to realize that the actions that we do and the choices that we make have consequences for the world, and it spreads all over the world. So Our Lady also asks for the First Saturday devotions, to pray the Rosary and go to Mass and confession on First Saturdays, so that we can begin to do our part to change the world.
Right. You talk about that on page 68 in the book, and you talk about also about the 5 things that are focused on: blasphemies against the Immaculate Conception, against her virginity, against the divine maternity. 4th, those who seek publicly to implant in the hearts of children indifference, disrespect, and even hate for this Immaculate Mother, and those who revile her directly in her sacred images. Certainly the 4th one is one that really strikes home, especially if you think in terms of the Fatima children, right? Because it's focused on the children.
Well, you know, it's almost as if the evil one has his eyes set on corrupting the children and hurting the children, because they're the innocent ones. They're the ones that Jesus pointed out in the scriptures, to learn from the little children their innocence, their openness, and that's what we all should become like. So he wants to try to destroy that. So those First Saturday devotions are a beautiful thing that people could do, getting to Mass and confession on the first Saturdays, spending 15 minutes praying the Rosary and meditating on the mysteries of the Rosary, and keeping Our Lady company so that her Immaculate Heart can triumph. And then it becomes a sort of a program of life. On the course of these 5 First Saturdays in a row, we can be making reparation for these different ways that Our Lady's heart is hurt. And then it becomes a program that we can continue. We don't want to just do it 5 times. We can continue periodically throughout our life. God is forming us and shaping us and helping us, and then we're doing our part to make reparation for these terrible sins that hurt God and hurt Our Lady so much.
So how long did it actually take you to write the part of the book that you had to write and the book to be published?
Well, I went in January of 2017. We went there to Fatima, and we did some videos, we did some pictures, we visited places, we talked to some of the there was a sister who works near the shrine. Her brother is a member of our community. There was a theologian at the shrine. We did some research there. And then our team went back to Stockbridge. I came back here to Rome. I began writing. They began helping me and editing. And so I think by the end of the year, we had it done. And I didn't write continuously because I had other things going on during the year. But it was a matter of taking time through the months to get it done. And then I think the book just came out at the end of the year, just before the end of the 100th anniversary of the apparitions. So it was all within the space of a year.
And how's been the reaction to it so far, just before we go?
Well, it came out toward the end of the year. We were trying to get it out for the Christmas, so that people would be able to have it as a Christmas present. But I think we just missed a deadline, so I think it came out like December 26th. So it didn't come out so well. But I've been getting it out to friends and family on Facebook. People in Stockbridge are ordering it. people who have seen it have loved it, and
Right.
they're very happy about it. They love the pictures. They love the style of it. So people, I think, are very touched by it, and I'm very, very pleased with that.
Well, you should be pleased. It is touching, and it's a beautiful book. Thank you so much, Father Joe Roesch from the Marion's Immaculate Conception, the book Fatima, A Pilgrimage with Mary, published by the Marion Press. Thank you so much, Father, for joining us live from Rome here on this very special bookmark. Check out this book through our religious catalog, EWTNRC.com. Join us next time right here on Bookmark. Thank you.